The grand hall of the Viraxillion was built for intimidation. Its ceiling shimmered with embedded galaxies, actual suspended star matter woven through with quantum silk, so that those brought here would feel, quite literally, small beneath the universe. The floor hummed beneath every footstep, tuned to a minor chord known to induce unease in most carbon-based species. This was where emissaries kneeled, where conquerors smirked, where mistakes were finalized with laser precision. Elias Trent was escorted in with all the ceremony of a particularly offensive package. Two Thyari sentinels, tall, glinting, unspeaking, gripped his arms. His boots squeaked embarrassingly on the polished obsidian floor, a detail that immediately eroded any chance of appearing dignified. He cleared his throat, mostly for effect. "So, this the welcome lounge?" The taller sentinel gave a mechanical grunt, which Elias assumed translated to "silence human," or possibly, "you are beneath my notice," or maybe just gas. He was brought to the center of the chamber, where a single dais rose in elegant tiers of glowing alloy. Atop it reclined the princess. Reclined, not sat. Princess Varela Vaughn of the Thyari Empire rarely sat unless victory had been declared or dessert was being served. Today, it seemed, she considered this occasion neither. She wore the ceremonial half-armor favored by the imperial court, sinuous and ornate, though its faint pulse hinted at real shielding. Her ears, elongated and sharp like elegant blades, flicked almost imperceptibly as she took him in. Her gaze was practiced detachment, the kind cultivated by centuries of believing your bloodline came directly from a star. She sipped something pale from a floating chalice that followed her like an obedient moon. Then at last she spoke. "This is it?" Elias blinked. "You'll have to be more specific." "This is humanity," she clarified, adjusting her position with theatrical languor. "This organism?" "Technically, yes," he sniffed, "though I think I'm one of the better models." Laughter rippled from the shadows behind her throne, where advisors, minor nobles, and sycophants leaned in for a better look at the condemned. Varela allowed herself a faint smile. "Pathetic," she said. It landed like a gavel. "Hey, I was in the middle of a diplomatic mission," Elias replied. "You know, peace talks, doves, handshakes, poorly catered buffets, ringing any bells. You trespassed into imperial negotiation space without authorization," she said, more to the room than to him. "You brought a malfunctioning shuttle, 3 containers of melted rations, and a note that read, 'We come in peace,' mostly." "To be fair, it was a typo," Elias said. "Should have said moistly. Galactic humidity's a real problem." A chuckle escaped someone in the gallery. Virela's eyebrow lifted slightly. The gallery fell silent. She stood, descending 2 steps of the dais, the light chasing her like a loyal pet. "You mock your own downfall?" Elias considered. "Honestly, when I woke up this morning, I didn't expect to be personally insulted by royalty. I figured I'd just spill coffee on myself and get scolded by my boss for misusing the term quantum flirting again." "Again?" she echoed, as if amused despite herself. "Turns out scientists take things very literally." She circled him now, hands clasped behind her back. Her expression was unreadable, but her pace was deliberate, curious. "And yet you stand here without trembling. Is it because your primitive nervous system has shut down, or are you merely that oblivious?" "Probably both," Elias said, "but mostly I've just had a really long week." There was a pause, not quite awkward, but not easy either. She stopped in front of him and looked directly into his eyes. He met her gaze, steady, unblinking. There was no challenge in it, no plea, just a quiet sort of gravity that threw off the rhythm of the room. Varela frowned, only slightly. "Your species wears fragility like armor," she said. "You speak of peace with clumsy mouths. You offer sincerity like it is currency." "Could be worse," Elias replied. "We used to offer landmines and mixtapes." The air around them shifted, thick with unspoken things. Varela turned away at last, as though breaking contact with something unstable. She ascended the dais again, her voice crisp. "Put him in observation. I want a full neural scan." "Do you at least validate parking?" Elias called after her, earning a groan from one of the guards. As they dragged him away, Varela resumed her position, but she did not recline. Her cup floated uncertainly beside her. Ignored. One of her advisors leaned close. "Shall we schedule his disposal?" "No," she said after a moment's consideration. "Not yet. He's amusing." "A jest, then?" "Perhaps." But in the hour that followed, she summoned the footage from the encounter 3 times. She watched his face, how it didn't flinch, how it stayed human. And in the quiet of the hall, where even the stars held their breath, she whispered to no one. He stood up, and somewhere in the observation wing, Elias sat cross-legged in his glowing cell, picking at the remains of the ration cube they'd given him. "Tastes like irony and foot sweat," he muttered to himself. "Classic intergalactic hospitality." The surveillance drone above beeped. He glanced up. "Hey, you got any idea what full neural scan involves? I had an uncle who got one and ended up thinking he was a toaster." The drone beeped again, probably in disapproval. Elias lay back and stared at the ceiling, which glowed a faint blue. "At least they didn't shoot me? Yet." He scratched his chin. "Wonder if I could get a diplomatic badge out of this. Maybe even a t-shirt." In the throne chamber, Varela watched his cell feed, arms crossed. She did not smile. Not quite. The cell's walls shimmered with the dispassion of a machine that knew it couldn't be escaped. They didn't glow. Glow suggested warmth, ambiance, or at the very least some dim notion of hospitality. No, these walls pulsed with that low-level, medical hallway kind of light that made you feel vaguely guilty for existing. Elias Trent sat on the only furnishing, a slab that was technically a bed, though it had all the charm of a conference room table, and tried to guess how long he'd been there. "Day 3?" he asked the ceiling. "Or is it still hour 6 of day 1, just wearing a very convincing costume?" The ceiling did not reply. He'd run out of ration cubes the previous night, if night even meant anything in a ship orbiting nothing but its own imperial protocol. His latest meal had been something labeled in 3 languages, 2 of which might have been threats. It tasted like someone had tried to replicate cheese using only childhood regret. He paced. He did push-ups. He staged an imaginary talk show interview in which he heroically outwitted the princess in a battle of insults. "Well, Varela, that's a fair point, but you've failed to consider that I am, in fact, hilarious." From above, the surveillance drone tilted slightly, its lens humming softly. "Don't give me that look," Elias muttered. "You're just jealous I have better dialogue." The door did not open so much as evaporate, silently unsealing in an organic swoop that made him flinch. The 2 sentinels returned, but this time their grips were marginally less violent. Either someone had instructed them to be gentle, or they'd finally decided he wasn't a threat to anything but his own dignity. "Princess Vaughn requests your presence," one intoned. "Well," Elias said, brushing imaginary dust from his shirt, "far be it from me to deny a royal appointment. Lead on, tall, silent, and vaguely terrifying." They didn't respond. He followed anyway. This time the chamber wasn't the star-strewn audience hall. It was a smaller room, private and almost intimate by Theari standards, which meant there were fewer statues of triumphant ancestors, and only one floating emblem that repeated the Empire's motto in glowing script: "Dominate to illuminate." Elias thought it sounded like a motivational poster written by a warhammer. Varela stood beside a translucent console, one hand resting on its curved edge, the other holding the same floating chalice from before. She hadn't changed, or maybe she had. Something about the angle of her ears made her seem more curious than cruel, but that could have just been wishful thinking. "You haven't been cooperative," she said without looking up. "I haven't been uncooperative either," Elias replied. "I've been neutrally sarcastic." She tapped the console. It responded by displaying a floating wireframe of his brain, pulsing gently like a jellyfish with secrets. "Your scans are chaotic." "Thank you. I strive for creative thinking." "No, I mean literally chaotic," she said, frowning. "Most species demonstrate pattern stabilization under stress. You become more erratic. There's no order." Well, if I had a credit for every time someone said that, I could have afforded a better peace envoy uniform. She looked at him, really looked this time, and something shifted in her tone. "Do you fear death?" "Daily," Elias said, but mostly in the form of tripping down escalators or eating expired eggs. Imperial execution? That's a new one. Variety's good for the soul. She tilted her head. You continue to treat this with levity. You continue to treat this like I should be foaming at the mouth, Elias countered. But fear doesn't make me more useful, does it? Silence. Not awkward. More like the silence before someone changes the subject. Varela stepped away from the console and motioned toward a second seat that had materialized while he was distracted. It unfolded from the floor like a metal blossom, trying very hard to be a chair. He sat. It was surprisingly comfortable. She remained standing. You were part of a failed mission, she said. Your leaders didn't even attempt retrieval. Yeah, that's kind of our thing lately. Abandon a diplomat, hope for the best, hold a somber press conference. She paused. You joke to shield yourself. No, Elias said, folding his hands in his lap. I joke because I have no idea what the hell is happening, and I'd rather not scream. A flicker passed through her features. Recognition, maybe, or amusement trying not to be noticed. You were supposed to be an insect, she said. Insignificant. Something to crush and move on. You're still welcome to try, Elias offered. Though I've been told I'm wiry. Her lip twitched. I've interrogated warlords, she continued. Assassins, spies. Sounds like a lively social calendar. None of them confused me. That made him sit up straighter. Ah, so I'm your first enigma. That's flattering. You lack fear, you lack submission, but you also lack ambition. It doesn't make sense. Maybe I'm just tired, Elias said. Tired of species measuring worth by how many ships they have, or how loud their leaders shout. You want to understand humans? We're not tidy. We're not built on logic. We're built on stories and mistakes and really good sandwiches. I have never eaten a sandwich, Varela said flatly. That's tragic. There was a pause. Then without ceremony, she dismissed the guards with a flick of her fingers. They hesitated, then left. The room sealed again. You're not what I expected, she said. Neither are you, Elias replied. She moved to the console and gestured again. The brain scan dissolved, replaced with a galaxy map. Zones pulsed in red and blue and indifferent white. Conflict regions, trade routes, territories contested by no less than 3 sentient species with differing opinions on the correct temperature of tea. This is the state of your universe, she said. Chaos, indecision, noise. And yet, Elias said, pointing at a distant corner, blinking green, someone out there still sells socks. She gave him a look that might have meant annoyance, but then again, might not have. You don't belong here, she said. I never said I did. Then why aren't you begging to go home? Because I think, Elias said slowly, you don't really want to send me. She said nothing. She didn't need to. He leaned back in the chair and sighed. Well, since we're getting cozy, maybe you could teach me that trick with the floating cup. I've got a party trick quota to maintain. Her ears twitched again. Subtle, unreadable. Then, against every protocol, against every calculation, she poured him a drink. The cup hovered to his hand with perfect poise. It tasted like starlight in trouble. The training arena aboard the Virexian was originally designed for the Emperor's personal guard. The walls adjusted to simulate atmospheric conditions from over 200 known worlds, and the floor could switch from ice terrain to volcanic ash in under a second. On most days, it echoed with the disciplined sounds of elite soldiers sparring. Today, it echoed with the clatter of Elias Trent hitting the ground for the 5th time in a row. I'm beginning to think this floor has something personal against me, he groaned, spitting out what tasted suspiciously like artificial sand. Princess Varela Vaughn, standing just beyond the edge of the arena's shifting terrain, did not smirk. She merely raised an eyebrow as the human pushed himself up again, wincing. You insisted on training. I said I was curious about how your warriors train. You're the one who interpreted that as a challenge. You joked that you could defeat a Thyari with a spoon. I joke a lot. Most of it isn't meant to be actionable. She signaled and the simulation reset, replacing the jagged rock floor with a smooth, breathable surface. The training drone hovering above Elias dimmed its defense protocols. You are not completely hopeless, she said. You avoid injury with surprising frequency. That's because I've made injury my roommate. Once you get comfortable with it, you stop being polite. Virella tapped the control panel, and the drone floated away. A pause lingered, full of the unspoken acknowledgement that this was not standard behavior for either of them. She stepped forward, circling the arena's edge. You are the first human I've met who acts as if you don't care what I think. I care, Elias said, just not enough to pretend to be someone else. She studied him. That is inefficient. Welcome to the human condition, he replied. Efficiency is way down the list after survival, humor, and putting cheese on things that shouldn't have cheese. You speak of your kind as if they are deeply flawed. We are. That's the best part. Virella looked away, her long ears shifting slightly in thought. I used to believe that flawlessness was power, that perfection commanded respect. But it breeds silence, predictability. I've noticed, Elias said, massaging his shoulder. You've got the most advanced civilization I've ever seen, and your people look like they'd rather explode than laugh. Laughter wastes oxygen, she said automatically, then hesitated. Or so we were told. Well, if you ever need a demonstration, I've got at least 4 embarrassing childhood stories involving pants, public speaking, and one highly judgmental parrot. Her lips twitched. Almost a smile. Almost. The overhead lights flickered, adjusting to a cooler hue. The atmosphere temperature dropped by 2 degrees, a subtle shift meant to keep combatants alert. Elias shivered. I miss jackets, he muttered. You miss outer garments? I miss earth garments, he clarified. Things made for being comfortable, not for looking like you're about to interrogate a moon. Virella watched him curiously. Why do you speak so casually about your imprisonment? Because if I don't, Elias said, I'll remember that I'm one decision away from being an interstellar footnote. She looked away again. He caught it. Unless that decision's already changed. I do not know what decision I'm making, she said quietly. They stood in the echoing chamber, silence stretching like a third presence between them. Then from nowhere a beep sounded. Virella turned to the wall panel, where a holographic alert blinked crimson. A voice came through, sharp and clipped. Highness, the Council requests your presence. There is a situation on Galthex Minor. She sighed, hands tightening behind her back. Galthex is always a situation? Elias, limping toward the edge of the arena, glanced at her. Want company? I'm good with diplomatic disasters. You are barely good with walking. I bring moral support and snacks. If someone gives me snacks, she stared at him, debating. You may observe. Nothing more. I'm great at observing. I once observed my entire cousin's wedding while locked in a broom closet. You truly excel at turning misfortune into anecdote. It's a survival mechanism. As they walked through the corridors of the Viraxillion, Virella's guard followed at a discreet distance. She did not object to Elias walking beside her instead of behind. That did not go unnoticed. The command deck bloomed into view, a circular interface surrounded by cascading data streams. The situation on Galthex Minor played out in real time, a civil standoff between 2 vassal houses. Each blamed the other for contaminating a shared atmosphere dome. Tensions were escalating into orbit. One of the commanders bowed to Virella. Highness, if this continues, both houses will resort to planetary bombardment. Virella raised an eyebrow. Over a filtration unit? Elias peered at the screen. That's not just any filter. That's a Gen X9. Limited run. Those things go for a fortune on the black market. I had a roommate who stole one and used it to purify his aquarium. The commander stared. You purified aquatic organisms with a Galthexi respirator? No, he did. I just shared rent and the police citations. Virella waved the commander aside. Patch me in to both house leaders. Moments later, 2 holograms flared to life. One blue, one green. Both featured dignitaries in ornate garb, looking equally insulted. Stop, Virella said before either could speak. You are embarrassing my empire over air. Negotiate, or I will replace you both with automated systems. The green one started to object. Elias leaned forward slightly. She's not bluffing, he said confidentially. She once threatened me with molecular disassembly for mispronouncing her title. Virella did not correct him. After several tense seconds, the dignitaries agreed to a neutral arbitration process, blinking out with sullen compliance. The crisis, such as it was, passed. Virella turned to Elias. You lied. I never threatened you with disassembly. Yeah, but it made you sound terrifying. Which worked. She studied him for a beat too long. You have influence. Despite no position. Despite no strength. You're welcome, Elias said. I accept payment in food, freedom, or friendship bracelets. This time she did smile. Brief, rare, brilliant. The guards didn't know what to make of it. Elias noticed but said nothing. Instead, he watched the stars through the command deck's observation dome, hands in his pockets, heart doing something foolish. She stood beside him. Not above, not beyond. Beside. The silence in the princess's private observatory was the kind that tried very hard to be profound, but ended up just awkward. Elias sat on the long bench made of some hyper-polished mineral that reflected stars but absolutely rejected comfort. He shifted for the third time. You know, he said, glancing sideways at Virella, for a species with empire-spanning reach and quantum drive tech, your furniture is aggressively anti-butt. You have mentioned this before, she said, not looking at him. I plan to continue. It's one of the few rebellions left to me. She sat motionless, her gaze fixed on the starscape beyond the dome. A nebula unfurled in a spiral of violet, pulsing like it had a vendetta against geometry. He followed her gaze. Pretty, he said. Also looks like it could eat a planet if it were in a bad mood. It already has, she replied. The Strivus swirl devoured an entire moon colony in 97 ARC. No survivors. Romantic, Elias said. Do you bring all your prisoners here to admire the cosmic appetite for destruction? Or am I special? You are many things, she said slowly. Predictable is not one of them. I'll take that as a compliment, since special might be pushing it. She finally looked at him, and for a moment the layers she usually wore, duty, command, aloof disdain, seemed thinner, like the difference between armor and formal wear. Why did you really come on the mission? She asked. I was told there'd be snacks, he said, then more softly. And because someone had to. There were 3 diplomats ahead of you in line. They all found reasons to stay. Allergies, sudden illnesses, a few suspiciously timed yoga retreats. You ever hear a grown man claim his aura was incompatible with space travel? I have now. I didn't run, Elias said, quiet now. I didn't pretend I had something more important. That counts for something, doesn't it? She didn't respond. Instead, she stood, moving to the control panel embedded in the wall. With a flick of her fingers, the dome darkened, and the stars retreated behind polarizing layers. A holo bloomed into view, displaying a security feed, grainy, filtered for translation protocols. It was Elias in his cell on day 1. He was talking to himself. Ah, he said, the highlight reel. You sang, Virella said, eyes narrowed. Poorly. Classic Earth morale booster, works in showers, traffic jams, and intergalactic captivity. You referred to my guards as the Council of Silent Disapproval. Well, they do radiate the vibe. And you named the drone, Carl. He had a presence. She stared at him, then unexpectedly laughed. It was small and contained, like it had slipped out before security protocols could catch it. I cannot recall the last time I laughed. Well, Elias said, let's hope it wasn't at an execution. It wasn't. Then I'm honored to be your first involuntary court jester. She tilted her head. There are whispers in the high houses. They do not like that I speak with you. Jealous I get more FaceTime? They fear contamination. Of your genes or your judgment? She didn't answer. That was answer enough. I'm not here to infect your empire, Elias said. Just here because your people broke my shuttle and stole my dignity. We offered you diplomatic protocol and a concrete mattress, he interrupted. But you know what? I'm not mad. I mean, I was mad. First couple days, I plotted 3 different escapes and 1 elaborate tap dance protest. But you're not what I expected either. Her ears twitched. You expected a tyrant. I expected someone who'd be more into monologuing, maybe more capes. But you ask questions, you observe, you think. That is not what the Empire values. Then maybe your Empire's scared of the wrong people. Another pause. This one felt heavier, like the artificial gravity had been dialed up slightly to emphasize subtext. "You keep surprising me," she said. "That's humanity's secret weapon. Mild confusion and stubbornness. And humor. That too, except puns. Even I have limits." She leaned against the console, her posture relaxed for the first time. "You are difficult." "Thank you, I practice." A soft beep interrupted the moment. The console shifted again, an alert window pulsing red. She frowned, fingers dancing over the controls. "A Thyrea scout vessel was intercepted near the Altran border," she said. "Let me guess. Another noble looking to start a war because someone blinked at them wrong?" "No," she said. "This one carried human cargo." Elias stood up, suddenly alert. "What kind of cargo?" "Prisoners." He felt the breath leave his chest. "There's not supposed to be any cross-border seizures," he said. "That was the agreement." The agreement was between bureaucrats who didn't think anyone would notice the breaches. "Do you know who they were?" She hesitated. "We will know soon. They are being brought here." "To the Violates?" She nodded. "You want me to talk to them?" "I want to see what happens when they see you," she said. "A human who wasn't broken. A human who got under the skin of the Empire's coldest air." He raised an eyebrow. "So I'm an inspirational figure now. Should I start writing memoirs?" "If you must," she said, "though I suggest a better title than 12 Days Without Socks." He smirked. "Noted." The moment held something like tension, but softened by the absurdity they both refused to deny. The weight of protocol was still there, heavy and ironclad, but between the lines of rank and empire, something else had taken root, something far more dangerous than rebellion. Recognition. "Virella," Elias said slowly, "why are you keeping me here?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The docking corridor hummed with the quiet malice of diplomacy at gunpoint. The Thayari escort ship had arrived under truce code, flanked by 2 Imperial interceptors with their weapons conveniently offline but testable. Elias stood beside Virella, who wore her ceremonial armor, sleek, dark, and ornamented with symbols that probably meant things like, "Do not interrupt, and I have vaporized people for less." "Remember," she said quietly, "this is not a negotiation." "Of course," Elias replied. "It's an ambush with nicer lighting." The ship's airlock hissed open, revealing 2 guards and 3 humans in restrained garb, filtration suits, thin and worn from overuse. They blinked as they were ushered into the corridor. One man, pale and gaunt with graying stubble, caught sight of Elias and froze. "Trent?" he said. "Elias Trent?" "Oh, good," Elias muttered. "My reputation's grown beyond my cell." "Thought you were dead," the man said, voice raw. "I thought you were in accounting, Meek," Elias replied. "Guess we both changed careers." Mick chuckled, then coughed, deep and dry. "They moved us, sold us really. Every month, fewer questions, longer rides." Virella gestured. "They're captors." "Detained," said one of her aides, a slim woman whose pupils flickered with data streams. "They carried falsified IDs and Imperial override codes. High House back channels. House Raverin." Virella's eyes narrowed. "Of course," she said. "Raverin always did think laws were suggestions." "So now what?" Elias asked. "Public tribunal? Secret trial? You duel them with sonic batons in a soundproof room?" "They will be made example," she said, "but not for the reason you think." "Let me guess. Because embarrassing the Empire is a greater sin than enslaving humans?" Her silence was a kind of confirmation. Elias stepped forward. "These people, my people, they don't need vengeance. They need a voice." "And you believe you can be that voice?" she asked, skeptical but not dismissive. "No," he said, "but I can be annoying enough that someone else gets curious and starts listening." Virella turned to the guards. "Assign quarters. Medical first. Then debriefing. Make sure they are treated as citizens, not specimens." The guards bowed and led the humans away. Mick gave Elias a nod as he passed. "You're different," Virella said after a moment. "I get that a lot. I mean from when you arrived." "Oh," Elias said. "Well, less bruises, more sass." "You have changed," she said, "but not in the way I expected." "You mean I didn't grovel or implode?" I mean, you remain human in a place designed to erase that. That's because we're not great at erasing ourselves. We just keep rebranding. A small laugh escaped her, soft but honest. Later on the lower deck gardens, a strangely serene place designed to mimic the wind of uninhabited moons, Elias leaned on the railing while Varela paced nearby. The hydrograss underfoot emitted a faint citrus scent. I made a decision, she said finally. Let me guess. You're going to install couches, real ones, with cushions. I'm abdicating. Elias blinked. Wait, what? I will renounce my claim. Step aside. There are others in the bloodline. You're serious? My presence destabilizes the court. My connection to you is unacceptable. He frowned. You're giving up the empire because of me? No, she said. I'm giving it up because of what you represent. Empathy, honesty, the kind of power that doesn't need to be announced to be felt. He stared at her. I was just trying to survive. And in doing so, she said, you taught a conqueror how to see. He was quiet for a while. Then, so what happens now? I go to the outer colonies, become a diplomat, or a gardener, perhaps an artist. You paint? I've never tried, but I hear humans admire those who fail in creative ways. He laughed. So you're running off to rediscover your soul? And you, he considered. Earth's still out there. Kinda messed up, but it's home. You could stay. I could, he said, but I think I've got one more ridiculous journey in me. Maybe I'll write a book. How to infiltrate an empire with bad jokes and decent hair. You do not have decent hair, she said. Harsh. I will miss you, she said softly. I'll miss you too. Even the weird silence before your guards blink. They stood together, windless air swirling faintly, gravity at 0.96 Earth standard. Artificial, measured, but the moment was real. You know, he said, when you first looked at me, you called humanity pathetic. I was wrong. I know, but it's nice to hear. Humans are not weak, she said, just inconvenient. He grinned. That's basically our national motto. They parted at the shuttle bay. Her new transport, sleek and minimalist, awaited on pad 4. His was less elegant, a patched-up diplomat's runner with more personality than reliability. Before boarding, he turned back. One more thing, he said. Tell your empire one joke, just one. Make it a good one. If they laugh, there's hope. And if they don't, then tell another, until they do. She nodded. He stepped into his ship, she into hers. And somewhere between stars and stubbornness, an empire quietly began to change. Cal Renner's cockpit smelled like hot plastic and fear, and not all of it was coming from the enemy. A bad omen drifted in on the comm static. Terran Fleet Command had gone unusually quiet after ordering the third wing into the upper thermosphere of Vari Moon Delta. Not that Cal minded silence. He preferred it to those chirpy command updates that made it sound like you weren't about to be incinerated by particle fire. His fingers danced across the console, slapping at a coolant override button that didn't want to be slapped. The ship's AI coughed, wheezed, and came back online with the reluctant sigh of a tired librarian. System diagnostics incomplete, it said. That's fine. I prefer mystery in my death. Beyond the canopy, the curve of the moon was scattered with debris, shattered ships, flares burning cold in the upper air, and plumes of leaking plasma that made it look like someone had cracked open a glow stick the size of a city. Lieutenant Renner, crackled the comm, voice stiff with the joyless urgency of a fleet tactician. Return to formation. You are drifting from a sign vector. I'm not drifting. I'm exploring. Drifting with propulsion is still drifting. I'll write that on my tombstone. Right after, at least he didn't die in formation. The line went dead, which was either a reprimand or a signal loss. Either way, Cal grinned and banked starward, cutting through a wake of shimmering junk. His HUD pulsed with data he barely skimmed. He flew by feeling, gut, instinct, and a healthy dose of dumb luck. Then came the signal, a thin, desperate ping, repeating, emergency channel, non-combat. He frowned. No Terran ships in that vector. The Vari didn't use this band, did they? He triangulated. The signal came from deep within a wrecked vessel, Vari hull signature, diplomatic grade, embedded in a high-orbit deadfall. It rotated slowly in the dark, like a wounded animal trying to bleed quietly. Cal hesitated. This wasn't his job. He was a fighter pilot, not a rescue op. Protocol said report and return. Then the signal pinged again, and this time he caught a secondary data tag. Biosigns. 1. Small. Alive. Of course, he muttered. It's never a barrel of monkeys and some fruit snacks. He spun his ship around, punched the throttle, and dove. Getting into the wreck was like threading a needle blindfolded in a hurricane. The ship's hull was ruptured in too many places to count, its spin a dizzying ballet of impending doom. Cal's fighter wasn't meant for docking, but he'd grown up hot-wiring speeders on Argo Station, and once you've stolen a senator's hover yacht, finesse becomes second nature. He matched spin, engaged maglock, slammed into the ruptured airlock with a jolt that nearly cracked a molar. The air was thin inside, silent. Emergency lights cast everything in a red haze, like he'd broken into someone's expensive nightmare. He stepped through the twisted corridors, suit sensors flaring with radiation warnings and hull instability, but he followed the bio sign like a man following music through a burning building. She was small, curled inside a collapsed stasis pod, tucked in with eerie calm. Long ears, pale skin. Vari. Her eyes opened, calm, unafraid. He blinked. Hello. I'm Cal. I come in peace. I also come illegally, but let's focus on the peace part. She tilted her head, studying him like an odd but vaguely amusing piece of furniture. Do you understand me? She nodded once. Well, thank the stars for universal translators. Can you move? Another nod. Right. Let's get out of here before the universe decides this is the part where everything explodes. They crawled, ducked, slid through slanted bulkheads and broken doors. Twice he had to carry her, the little girl light as a whisper in his arms. When the hull groaned, she clung to his neck with the dignified stoicism of a kid raised by royalty and taught never to scream unless it's in six-part harmony. The blast hit just as he launched off the wreck. His ship shook. Alarms screamed. Something went foom in the back panel. He swore in 3 languages, 2 of which were considered deeply offensive by peace treaties. But they were out, floating in orbit, alive. She looked up at him in the cockpit's second seat, her fingers still wrapped around a crash harness as though it were a very disappointing scepter. He looked down at her. I know this is weird, but do you have, like, a mom? Preferably one who doesn't blame me for this? She blinked. She is Queen Sarah Vari. You have saved me. You will now be honored. He groaned. Please tell me honored doesn't mean executed in Vari. She frowned. Number it means you will be linked to the Queen? He froze. Linked? How? She smiled, the first smile he'd seen on her porcelain face. You'll see. And Cal, pilot, occasional wise-ass, accidental hero, felt a cold trickle of dread inch down his spine. He muttered, note to self, next time ignore distress signals from alien royalty. Then the retrieval beam from a Vari diplomatic ship caught them both, and the stars above Vari Moon Delta blinked once, like an eye watching something it hadn't expected. The Vari diplomatic vessel was less a spaceship and more a flying cathedral. Cal sat in a floating chair that moved with his heartbeat, in a room where walls shifted colors based on ambient emotion. Everything hummed, not like his fighter's rattletrap engine, but with an orchestral purr, as though the ship were alive and gently judging him. An orb drifted toward his face. It pulsed. Please do not touch the reverence node, said a voice from nowhere. He pulled his hand back. I wasn't going to. I was inspecting. For reverence. Thorough reverence. The orb pulsed again. Disapprovingly, if such a thing was possible. They'd taken the girl, princess apparently, into a room that had melted into being from a blank corridor and then left him in a waiting chamber with no doors, no windows, and too many smells. Cal didn't know what Vari incense was made of, but he was fairly certain it was alive and possibly offended. His suit's comm pinged. Lieutenant Renner. The voice was human, his handler from Terran Command, Colonel Vant. Colonel, Cal whispered. Good news, I'm alive. Bad news, I may be about to marry an alien queen. It's been a weird day. You're not getting married, Lieutenant. You're being honored, and possibly embedded in a 1,000-year-old psychic pact. Oh, well, that's fine then. Try not to offend anyone. The Vari are delicate about ceremony. Ceremony? I got sucked into a crystal hallway by a floating chair. I think I passed the part where etiquette matters. The wall in front of him blinked out of existence. Two Vari guards stood beyond, faces expressionless, beneath helmed crests shaped like wings. They gestured. Time to be honored, Cal muttered, standing up. Hope I don't explode from cultural misunderstanding. He was escorted through halls that changed behind him, colors dimming, lines smoothing, the ship rearranging itself like a dream with somewhere to be. They stopped before a circular chamber filled with a low, resonant sound that pulsed like a heartbeat in deep water. At the center stood Queen Ceres. She didn't move as he entered. She wore no crown, no visible armor, only a robe made of something that shimmered like liquid language. Her ears, long and arched like crescent moons, tilted slightly as she acknowledged his presence. I greet you, Cal Renner of Terra. Her voice had a cadence that wasn't quite song, but it hovered there, half a note from music. He gave a short, awkward bow. Hey, you've got a nice ship. Smells a bit like space cinnamon, but I'm into it. A Vari elder beside her cleared his throat with the slow disapproval of a glacier. Ceres raised one hand. The chamber dimmed. You saved my daughter. Wasn't really a choice. She kind of crash-landed in my path. You entered a decaying vessel against orders. You risked your life for hers. Well, he said, rubbing the back of his neck, the rescue part was definitely on purpose. The rest sort of happened. You are to be honored. According to the law of the spiral, you will be bound. Cal raised both eyebrows. Bound? Like, spiritually? Yes. Okay, that's... Wow. And what does that mean exactly? The elder stepped forward. It is a sharing, a gift, rarely offered. The spiral link joins your thoughts to hers, not as a merging, more a harmonic resonance. Cal blinked. I'm sorry. Did you just say I'm going to resonate with the Queen? Correct. Okay, cool, great. Just checking that this wasn't some fancy way of turning me into a new kind of toaster. Sarah stepped toward him. Her presence was less walked across a room and more shifted gravity. You may refuse, she said. He opened his mouth, closed it. Thought of the little girl's hand gripping his suit. Thought of the explosion. And thought of the very fragile line between a peace and war being held by this exact moment. I accept. With honor and minimal confusion. The elder raised both hands. A beam of light flickered from the chamber ceiling and struck Cal in the chest. Not painful, just warm, familiar, like something had crawled into his bones and was now organizing a meeting in his spinal column. He gasped. The Queen closed her eyes. For a breath, nothing happened. Then something tugged in the back of his mind. A thread, a tone, not words, but a sensation, like remembering someone else's memory, walking through a garden he'd never seen, hearing laughter that wasn't his. He stumbled. Ceres opened her eyes. You are now spiral-bound. I feel tingly, he said, and then, as the light faded, also slightly aroused, but I think that's just the aftershock. Silence. Then, unexpectedly, the Queen smiled. It was small, barely there. But the room noticed. The walls shimmered. The guards blinked. One of the Vari scribes dropped a pen. The ceremony ended. Cal was led to a guest chamber that made his quarters on the Terran cruiser look like a prison cell made of duct tape. The bed adjusted to his posture. The lights adapted to his mood. A small orb hovered nearby and played soft ambient frequencies whenever he made eye contact. He lay back and stared at the ceiling, which turned into stars. So, he said to no one, I'm psychic pen pals with the Queen now. There was a pulse of warmth in his thoughts. Not words, just presence, and a flicker of something that might have been amusement. Cal sighed. This is going to get weird, isn't it? The ship gently hummed in agreement. Cal woke to the sound of a small harp playing itself. It wasn't the worst way to start a day, even if it wasn't technically morning. Vari ships didn't bother with time zones. They ran on something called cycle harmony, which made Terran watches and schedules entirely meaningless. According to his wrist display, it was currently 9:67 a.m., and also the second day of spiral reflection, whatever that meant. He was either late, early, or in a philosophical mood. He sat up, groggy, the memory of the spiral link still humming faintly in the back of his head, like the ghost of a hangover you couldn't tell your friends about without sounding like a cultist. "Morning," he said, glancing toward the floating orb near his bed. "Or afternoon, or possibly Wednesday." The orb responded with a low chime that translated somehow into, "You are summoned." Cal dressed quickly in the ceremonial tunic they'd provided, a silken thing that seemed to disapprove of human knees. The fabric rearranged itself to fit, but not happily. It had the grudging cooperation of a cat being made to wear socks. 2 guards met him outside his chamber and silently escorted him through the ship. As always, the hall subtly reshaped behind them. He could never quite tell if it was to preserve privacy or just because Vari architecture had commitment issues. They arrived at a narrow chamber filled with scentless steam and music that sounded like a vibraphone being played by sentient jellyfish. Queen Ceres stood at the center, her long ears twitching slightly as she turned toward him. "You're adjusting," she said. "That's one way to put it," Cal replied. "Another is, I'm dreaming in a language I don't know, having shared emotional déjà vu, and occasionally hearing your thoughts when I try to focus on coffee. So yes, adjusting." She gestured toward a table that shimmered into being beside them. A set of small crystal cups appeared, filled with an iridescent liquid that looked like melted nebula. "This is Lee Haas. It will assist in stabilizing the link." He eyed the cup. "Does it also taste like fermented math equations?" "Only the older vintages." He drank. It fizzed against his tongue, and then did something unexpected. It sang, a brief, internal note, as though his organs had joined a chorus. He set the cup down carefully. "Well, that's going on my top 5 drinks that might have been alive list." She didn't laugh, but something twitched at the corner of her mouth. Or maybe he imagined it. Or maybe the spiral link was already convincing him she found him charming. Dangerous territory. "You are needed," Sarah said. "Cool. Cool. For what?" "There is unrest. The war is not yet quiet. The outer clans believe your presence here is an affront. Technically, I'm an honorific psychic guest, not a political insult. They do not see it that way. Of course they don't. Can't anyone in this galaxy appreciate sarcasm?" The chamber darkened, and the air shimmered with holographic projection. Dozens of star systems lit up in various shades of red and blue. A slow rotation revealed border zones, conflict fronts, and, uncomfortably near, the Terran lines. "Great," Cal muttered. "I leave for 1 day, and everyone starts throwing missiles again." "The child you saved is heir to more than one throne. Your actions have shifted the power balance. Some see your bond as manipulation. Let me get this straight. I rescue a kid, get mind linked to her mom, and now I'm a galactic chess piece." "Yes." "I was hoping the answer would be no, but fine. Let's go with yes and just see how weird it gets." A holographic council chamber formed around them. Not real, just a projection of a planned summit. Alien figures flickered into existence, each bearing the mark of a Vari house or allied domain. One of them resembled a heavily armored plant. Another looked like a wolf made of bronze and poetry. Saris turned to him. "You will accompany me to the Council of Accord." "Cool. Love a good council. Any chance they serve snacks?" "They serve judgment, and also vine cakes." "I'll take the vine cakes. The judgment I get enough of from my old academy instructors." A pause passed between them. The Queen looked at him, really looked, in the way that made him feel both naked and catalogued. He felt something hum through the link. "You are afraid," she said. He didn't answer at first, then, "A little. Not of you, just, I'm a fighter pilot. I was trained to shoot things, not diplomatically entangle myself with alien royalty during a crisis." "You're adapting." "That's what they said when I accidentally jury-rigged a hyperdrive with chewing gum and ruined an admiral's promotion ceremony." "I read that report." "Oh, no. It was impressive." "Oh, good-o, just making sure you didn't spiral link the memory of me getting court-martialed in my underpants." Her lips twitched again. Cal felt a pulse of warmth from the link, Light amusement colored with something harder, pride maybe, or some royal version of affection. He couldn't quite name it. It lived in the spaces between thoughts. She turned back to the display. They will test you. I figured. I just hope the test isn't written. He stepped forward beside her. The holograms shimmered, each counselor flickering into brief, sharp focus. Leaders of peoples he'd only read about in flight briefings, now waiting to dissect his presence. Let's do this, he said, trying to sound braver than he felt. She looked at him once more, long ears tilting slightly forward. You are not alone, Cal Renner. He smiled. Yeah, I've got a whole empire's attention, a psychic bond with a queen, and a gut feeling I'm going to say something deeply stupid in the first 5 minutes. Then we begin. The chamber dissolved around them. The ship reoriented. Somewhere in the distance, a choir began to sing in tones that only half existed in physical space. Cal took a breath. Worst case, he whispered, I crash the council. Best case, maybe they don't throw me out an airlock. From somewhere deep in his thoughts, the spiral link answered, amusement, curiosity, and a faint undercurrent of, we'll see. Cal stood exactly where he'd been told not to. He was 2 paces to the left of his designated honor attendant alignment marker, which according to the Vari translator sphere, had been chosen for its historical energy balance, and also because it was aesthetically resonant with the memory of triumph. That was a fancy way of saying someone once won an argument while standing there. He adjusted his ceremonial tunic for the 5th time. The fabric, now mildly annoyed with him, refused to drape properly, and may have started retaliating by itching in non-Euclidean locations. Across the Council of Accords amphitheater chamber, Saris glided toward the central platform, flanked by floating banners of glowing script and a melody that somehow whispered respect. Around them sat the representatives of 15 stellar nations, 23 minor protectorates, and 1 sentient vapor that required a containment field and spoke entirely in metaphor. Cal resisted the urge to wave at it. Probably rude. Saris raised her hand. The chamber stilled. 1,000 tiny drones stopped mid-flight. Holograms held their place in still light. And the background music, which had been building toward an elegant crescendo, stopped as if caught sneaking snacks from the ceremonial buffet. Honored Accord, Saris began, you are gathered to bear witness to the act of spiral binding between myself and the Terran pilot known as Cal Renner. One of the counselors, a translucent being shaped like a crystallized fern, shifted in its containment gel. Queen Saris, the bond with a human soldier, a Terran no less, is destabilizing. Our people fear influence. A soldier is not a diplomat. Another voice, this one from a reptilian figure with golden eyes, hissed out. They are impulsive, prone to short-sightedness. Their history is littered with conflicts over edible plants and mating rights. Cal raised a hand. Okay, yes, we did have a 100-year war over a spice, but in our defense, it was very tasty, and nobody told us about flavor enhancement nanobots until, like, last decade. That got a few side eyes. One of the robotic delegates emitted a beep that might have been laughter, or a reboot. Queen Saris gestured. This human saved my child from death. He acted without hesitation, without promise of reward. Such courage, uncoerced, is the foundation of trust. A new hologram flared to life. Footage from the wrecked shuttle, showing Cal hauling the small Vari girl through flaming corridors, shielding her with his own body as the structure collapsed around them. The vapor delegate, which had been slowly turning colors, pulsed a shade that translated roughly to reluctant awe. Cal leaned toward the queen and whispered, You're really good at these dramatic reveals. Do you take lessons, or is that like queen instinct? She didn't answer, but the spiral link sent a wave of quiet amusement, possibly tinted with condescension. The bronze wolf delegate stepped forward. And now? What will you do with this bond, Queen of Stars? Cal straightened. I've got a few ideas. First, no offense, but your political meetings are terrifying. I vote we all start using safe words and stress donuts. Dead silence. Then the robot beeped again. Twice. The wolf narrowed its gleaming eyes. Are you mocking this council? Not at all, Cal said. Look, I'm just a guy who flies fast and sometimes crashes into diplomacy. But I didn't ask for this link. I didn't even know it existed. What I do know is that when a kid is screaming for help, you don't run a background check. You save them. More silence, but heavier now. Thoughtful. The Queen moved to stand beside him, her long ears tilting back in quiet solidarity. There is precedent, she said, ancient, from the first age of exploration, when our people sought alliances by action, not by species. The spiral does not recognize borders, only intent. The fern-like delegate rippled. Then let the spiral speak. The council chamber dimmed. Lights refracted. A drone flew into the center, carrying a coiled artifact, a glowing ring of living crystal. Cal recognized it. The thing had buzzed at him yesterday in a corridor and tried to offer him a mushroom. He'd politely declined. Now it hovered between them. The spiral resonator, apparently sentient, and probably judgmental. Saris placed her palm against it. It pulsed. Cal looked at it, then at her. Do I just touch it? Yes. With my hand? Yes. Okay, but is it going to touch it? He sighed and placed his hand next to hers. A sound erupted. Not quite music, not quite static. For a moment the chamber stretched sideways. Colors bled into new shapes. Cal felt every eye in the room watching him, and also every eye from every moment he'd ever doubted himself. The spiral link bloomed to life, and then it spoke, or rather, projected. Emotion, image, clarity. Not words, but understanding. It showed Cal holding the child, showed Saris watching from orbit, breath caught. It showed the consequences of that choice rippling outward, alternate timelines like threads, some leading to war, others to peace. It showed him standing in front of a ship that wasn't built yet, saying something funny to someone important. And it showed the Queen, older, laughing. The spiral finished its broadcast with a low musical chime that meant something like, "So there." The artifact floated back. The vapor changed color again, this time to hesitant approval. The robotic delegate emitted a 4-beep code that translated to recommendation for provisional trust parameters. The bronze wolf growled. The spiral has chosen, Cal exhaled. So, we good? The Queen's gaze flicked toward him. We are stable. For now. Great. Do I get a badge? Maybe a nameplate? Honorary Destiny Adjacent has a nice ring to it. The council recessed. The lights brightened. One of the jellyfish musicians began playing again, this time in a major key. Back aboard the Vari vessel, Cal slumped into his chair. That went better than expected, he said. The orb near him pulsed. You nearly insulted 4 sovereign systems. Only 4. That's a record low. The Queen entered, her expression unreadable. She studied him, then sat across from him, hands folded. You diffused a century of tension with jokes. I diffused it with truth. The jokes were just, frosting. Weird, slightly inappropriate frosting. She said nothing, but the link pulsed. Warmth, respect, a note of wary fondness. Then she added softly, there will be more. More jokes. More danger. He leaned back. Then I guess I better work on some new material. Cal stood on the observation deck of the Vari flagship, watching the blue swirl of the Oridean rift fold into itself like a galactic pothole being politely removed by physics. It was the kind of sight that should have inspired awe or reverence, or at the very least, an instinct to take a holographic selfie. But instead, he felt something stranger, quiet, not the anxious kind of quiet or the suspicious kind, just quiet. The kind of quiet you got when your brain stopped trying to guess what the next 10 minutes were going to throw at you and finally agreed to enjoy the view. Queen Saris stood beside him, silent. Her long ears were tilted slightly forward, a signal he'd learned meant attentiveness, or once disapproval when he'd accidentally sat in the seat reserved for planetary dignitaries and his ceremonial robe had split in a rather revealing way. So, he said, no war. No war. No angry vapor delegate challenging me to a duel of metaphors. They issued a polite apology and sent a bouquet of scented thoughts. And the bronze wolf guy? He has requested a temporary alliance treaty and has offered a ceremonial fruit platter. Cal blinked. Well, now I feel underdressed. The Queen said nothing, but the spiral link radiated amusement. They'd done it. Not just survived the Council of Accord, but reoriented it. The bond had shifted from a political curiosity to a diplomatic keystone. The spiral had spoken. The delegates had listened. Probably out of shock, but Cal would take the win. He glanced at her. Can I ask you something? You already are. Right, okay. Why me? Saris turned to him, her expression unreadable. Because you acted without calculation. You protected what mattered, not what benefited. That quality is rare in this galaxy. He scratched his head. I guess I just didn't think about it. I saw a kid in trouble and moved. Precisely. Great. So my lack of long-term planning is now galactically admired. My academy instructors would be thrilled. A long pause passed between them. Then she stepped closer. Not quite touching distance, but closer than ceremony allowed. You have changed, he snorted. I haven't made a single inappropriate joke in 2 days. That might be a record. That is not what I meant. He looked down at his hands. I feel it. Not just the bond, everything. Like, I've been reprogrammed slightly. Less shoot first, wisecrack later. More, I don't know. Try not to start a diplomatic incident with your breakfast energy. She studied him. You were always capable. You merely lacked context. He met her gaze. And now I've got a queen in my head. Context established. They stood in silence a moment longer, the rift behind them folding closed like a sigh of the universe. Then the door to the observation deck hissed open, and in bounded the reason for all of it. Talesa, the queen's daughter, half running, half gliding, in that peculiar Vari child way. Her hair was tied back in ceremonial loops, and she held what looked suspiciously like a Terran comic book in one hand and a royal seal in the other. Pilot Cal, she chirped, you promised to explain the concept of a banana peel gag today. I did, and I take that educational duty very seriously. In fact, I've commissioned a full banana hologram demonstration, complete with historical footnotes. She beamed. Does it end with you falling over again? I make no promises, Your Very Tiny Majesty. She zipped off down the corridor, trailing something that might have been floating ribbons or enthusiastic particles of ambient joy. Saris sighed. She has grown attached. Well, I did save her life and introduce her to slapstick comedy. That's a high bar. She refers to you as her Earth uncle. He grinned. Honestly, I'll take it. The Queen didn't smile, but the link buzzed with soft warmth. Then it shifted, subtly, like a curtain being drawn in reverse. Something in her presence changed. Less queen, more person. Still regal, still alien, but slightly accessible. I must ask, she said, now that your name is known to the courts, now that alliances whisper around your actions, what do you want? He opened his mouth, closed it, thought about his ship, still being repaired after taking a plasma bolt to the hull, thought about Earth, where time still marched to clocks and not starlight harmonics, thought about the bond. I want to stay, he said, at least for now. I'm not done figuring out what this connection means, and I think you're going to need someone who understands the difference between strategic deployment and slapstick timing. Saris nodded. You may remain. In truth, I was hoping you would. Cal let that sit there for a moment, neither teasing it nor running from it. Then he said, so if I'm staying, do I get a cool title? Something dramatic? Like Galactic Co-Advisor of Shenanigans? She raised a brow. I was considering Interim Envoy of Terran Affairs. Boring. Add lasers. Interim Envoy of Terran Affairs and optional laser guidance. Perfect. They left the observation deck together, walking side by side down a corridor that subtly changed shape to accommodate their steps. The ship hummed around them, alive, aware, strangely at peace. Later that day, Cal tripped over a ceremonial banner while demonstrating banana-related comedy and managed to knock over an entire refreshment table prepared for the Cephalon delegate. The delegate, a seven-eyed being who communicated by blinking in Morse code, blinked twice and then laughed. a sound that resembled a ship's warp drive powering down gently. It was, according to the translated court bulletin, the first time a cephalon had expressed humor in 400 years. Cal was given a second title, Ambassador of Unintended Diplomacy. He accepted it with pride. As the weeks passed, Cal found a rhythm. Not quite Vari, not quite Terran. Something new. The spiral link remained, a hum, a thread, a reminder that he was part of something strange and vast and meaningful. And when he closed his eyes at night, he didn't dream of missiles or dogfights or flaming escape corridors. He dreamed of stars and the voice of a queen who had once said, very quietly, "You are not alone." He believed her now.